All right, I just started recording again. I forgot I hadn't even been recording.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get rid of the glare.
Okay. Looks fine on my end.
All right, cool. Yeah, it's good. All right. It's like it's funny, I was like going through all the different hypothetical combinations of light, like, overhead on, or overhead off, and yeah, just trying to find the best one. But I guess this is reasonably good now. So yeah, I guess we can get into it. It's too bad that we were interrupted before when we were, because I really felt like we were about to get into into the meat of it, and just talking about Mitt Romney, and the whole incident of how he showed up at a Black Lives Matter protest, and a lot of liberals were very quick to praise him.
Yep. And it seems like that's been happening a lot lately, where folks get like too excited, and they just, I don't know, they heap praise on conservative folks who have been pretty, I don't even know if problematic is the right word. I mean, they've just been antithetical
reprehensible.
Yeah,
reprehensible, is probably more accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're heaping praise on them for showing some hint of humanity or some modicum of normalcy or something, and it's almost like people want to wipe away like the reality of the history of what they represent. I mean specifically with George Bush, and I guess it's just such a huge difference or juxtaposition between the leadership we have now, that people are just so reprehensible by what Trump is doing, that they get excited to see George Bush say something that sounds like there's a trace of humanity in it, and all of a sudden they want to say, hey, maybe he wasn't so bad or something. And it's like, let's just look at it for what it is and not try to rewrite history.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what's really, infuriating about it is just like how short their memories are. Like, they forget how much they hated Bush, and they forget that, when Bush was president, they were doing exactly the same thing. Like, before we were talking about Jacobin, and this is, a sort of topic that I haven't seen a lot of people explore, which is that, in the same way that Bush's reputation has been whitewashed because Trump is presented as this, unique horror, as like somehow, being, having this just unique existential level of awful that's never existed before. And, I understand that in certain ways, but, at the same time, like, Bush started a war that led to the deaths of upwards of 1 million people, and he's a war criminal who, if we had anything resembling a fair system, would be behind bars. And these, liberals that are so quick to praise Bush era conservatives now forget that literally the exact same thing they're doing was done during the Bush years. Like, on MSNBC, you would see lifelong Republican criticizes Bush, says he's a disgrace to the conservative movement. You'd see all these ex-generals, criticizing Bush. And I actually, because we were talking about Jacobin before, that is sort of an article I wanted to, possibly do for them, which, is sort of going to be a long-term project, but basically I'll just take quotes, from the Bush years, and contrast them, like from, like what, what people were saying about Bush, and contrast them with what people are saying about Trump today, just to kind of show that, like, just to kind of show that, like, they're just setting the bar ridiculously low, and they have such a short-term memory, and they're just allowing them to be, you know, cynically manipulated by, you know, by certain conservatives who, you know, I feel are very good at manipulating liberals, like whichever faction of conservatives is out of power at the moment, you know, like, you know, because, you know, the conservative movement itself includes groups of people who hate each other. Like you have the social conservatives, you have the fiscal conservatives, and, you know, that are at odds, and they have no problem working together. If one of them ends up on the outs, you know, they'll, you know, just as gladly, you know, work with liberals or manipulate liberals to get their message across. And that's what sort of happened, you know, with, like, you know, various paleo conservatives during the Bush years, and what I think is happening again now, you know, with a lot of neocons, with people like Bill Kristol or Tom Nichols, like people that liberals on Twitter are very fond of, you know, of retweeting. You know,
people like Ish.
Does Ish? Have you seen Ish retweet them?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah.
messing with them.
Notice I didn't say anything at all. I didn't even respond to that.
So you don't think it's just people randomly just being fond of a bygone era? You think that they're actually being manipulated?
Well, I mean, you know, I think there's a variety of motives. I mean, I think both can be true at the same time. I think, you know, you can just sort of see, like, you know, the horror of what Trump is doing right now, you know, like children being thrown in cages, you know, just the fact that he openly enables racism, enables the far right. He, you know, morally equivocates about Nazis. And, you know, like, I want to be charitable and say that I think a lot of people see that people, you know, who, you know, don't necessarily follow politics on a daily basis and just think, you know, God, I just, you know, want things to feel a bit more sane again. I want things to not be this horrible, you know, and I totally get that. But I do think that because that genuine feeling exists, there are going to be people who take advantage of it. And, you know, right now, I think some of the people who are taking advantage of it, you know, and have been, are these, you know, sort of opportunistic, you know, conservatives, neocons, who basically at the moment sort of find themselves, you know, like on the fringes of the Republican Party. So they have basically gone and, you know, told, you know, Democrats, hey, we hate Trump too. We're on the same side. But, you know, and, but, you know, the result of that has been, you know, they, you know, have, like, you know, been constantly lecturing Democrats and, you know, and liberals about how best to get Trump out of office. And they've been given a lot of free, you know, airtime on MSNBC, and basically sold the message for the past 3 years that in order to get Trump out, we just need to win over, you know, respectable Republicans, and they'll vote for, you know, like a centrist Democrat like Joe Biden, and they're necessary to win the election. And I think that a lot of, you know, Democratic voters who don't follow politics that closely and are just driven by this, you know, desire to get Trump out, you know, just sort of ended up going along, you know, going along with them, and never really, you know, interrogating that idea or questioning the premise that Biden is, you know, the most electable candidate. And I would say at this moment that I believe that Biden, you know, is the favorite to win, just because of, you know, the COVID epidemic, and because, you know, because of the fact that we're in the midst of a recession. But the thing is, that was not apparent, you know, when this primary was going on, you know, and the fact, and, you know, if this was not going on right now, and he was just, you know, a bumbling, senile guy running against Trump, you know, like with all of his rallies and his enthusiastic support, I think he would be, you know, like like done for. And at this point, unfortunately, you know, the fact that Biden, you know, is probably going to win is just, you know, going to be used by centrist Democrats, you know, to say, see, our strategy worked, and they'll just cherry pick and ignore the other factors, and they'll, you know, assume that, you know, Bernie Sanders wouldn't have won and Biden would have. But I actually think that at this point, you know, probably almost any Democrat would be able to you know, to defeat Trump. So it definitely
so
does.
you think it's swung that far in the favor of Trump right now that any Democrat could beat him? That Biden is now, because, you know, Biden wasn't really the favorite, say, pre-COVID.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he definitely wasn't. And I think, you know, pre-COVID, if that status quo had continued, he probably would have gone down, you know, in flames in a way. Like, you know, obviously wouldn't have been as big of a landslide because the country is more polarized today. But I think he, you know, to some degree would have been, you know, Walter Mondale 2.0. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he's an overwhelming favorite. And I think that Trump, you know, has a better chance of winning than, you know, like an incumbent president with these, you know, particular set of circumstances, you know, normally would, just because of how awful Biden is. But, you know, the flip side of that is, because of these circumstances, I think even a weak Democrat like him does stand a pretty good chance of winning.
Now, besides COVID, I mean, do we think that the
go on. I'm sorry, Mike.
That Trump's reaction to the protests and all of that have hurt him even more? Do we like his whole like hiding? Do we think like his whole hiding in the White House?
And let me couple that question. Let me couple that with another question. Let me add another to that, because I was going to say the exact same thing about Biden. You know, his kind of silence during, you know, you heard more from Mario Cuomo during COVID, and especially after Biden, which you, again, I'm not crying about what Biden said on Charlemagne, but because he said what he said on Charlemagne, you would kind of think that he'd be more visible right now, especially, you know what I mean, with what's going on. So I want to add to, you know, Flavius's question, and then make a second part, a part B, in regards to Biden.
Yeah, I think, oh, I'm sorry, was there anything more you wanted to add to that?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, I do think Biden, you know, has been, you know, hurt by his reaction. I mean, has actually, you know, been hurt by the fact that he hasn't been saying much right now. Like, I do think that, you know, he is, you know, the slight favorite, all things considered, but I think this is, you know, a very particular weakness of his, that he isn't, you know, out there, you know, just taking a stronger, you know, unequivocal stance against, you know, against, you know, the over policing, that he isn't actually trying to capitalize on it and trying to, you know, just say, when I get in office, I'm going to do something to reform it. He's just, you know, sort of soft pedaling and trying to play, you know, both sides. And, you know, the unfortunate thing about that is, when you do that, you don't appeal to anyone really, because, like, you know, the reactionary, you know, like tough on crime, you know, racist types, you know, are never going to vote for any Democrat, you know, like, you know, especially, you know, in the midst of this, you know, what's going on now, especially at this, you know, moment. Like, I think when, you know, during the height of the COVID epidemic, you may have gotten like some first responder types that, you know, were disgusted by Trump's response, Trump's handling of it, and might have considered, you know, voting for like a moderate Democrat like Biden over that. But now I think, you know, that the issue of, you know, of policing has become so amplified. You know, I think I think that, you know, that particular, you know, conservative law and order base that, you know, voted for him last time is just gonna vote for him by even larger numbers now. So really, you know, Biden is not going to win them over, and he's going to just, you know, piss off, you know, the people, he needs to actually vote for them. He's going to piss off the left. He's, it could hurt him, like among younger voters, and particularly like, maybe younger black voters. Like, it seems like, during the primary, he did better. Like among all racial groups, there was like a generational divide, and like his support, in the South was mainly older black voters. And I do think that yeah, if Trump does win, it's going to be, Biden just like literally, could not excite anybody, and he literally just, appeals to nobody.
So here's my thing on that is so that's interesting that you're saying that basically the law and order types are really just going to be energized by everything that's happening, and Trump can only look good with those types by going against what's happening in the protests. So that makes sense. As far as Biden is concerned, I mean, yeah, Biden's been hiding for a long time. It's kind of like just what he does. So like during COVID, but he was ghost during COVID.
Like ghost.
Like we didn't even know if he was still alive. I mean,
he was really a ghost.
Some people said he looked so good during the last debate that maybe they had pumped him full of a lot of drugs and he had to recover because that was the only time he looked good. So they pump him full of drugs. He does really good for a debate, and then he has to recover for a few months. But you're right. During the protest, he's slightly more out there.
He is more visible.
He was a ghost. Yeah, but that's because we're comparing it to him being totally invisible. Mm-hmm. So he's just not very. He's not a very present. Yeah, he's just not very present.
Now, one thing I noticed, Mike, speaking on what you said, there, with the law and order people, I've been talking to people. I talked to my friend Jim yesterday, who I had an encounter with on Facebook, and there are like people are really afraid. I'm literally talking to him yesterday, and he's like walking around nervous. He's afraid. He's like, civil unrest and cities being overthrown, and I get the idea that those people who run with that narrative aren't just, and it's something that's important to me, because while I don't always agree with people's political positions or just positions in general on certain things, I can see that people feel a certain way. Like I'm cognizant that while I think it may even be ridiculous why you feel that way, you feel a certain way, and I'm just kind of gauging, people, and I see that there are a lot of people, not on the liberal side of things, or not in the BLM side of things, or what have you, not in the defund camp or the abolish camp, that are genuinely afraid. Like they're and afraid to the point where, like, my friend was pretty much frantic yesterday, and that's when I realized, like, wow, this isn't just me and you having a conversation on Facebook where we disagree because you shared a Candace Owens video. You really are afraid when you watch the news and the narrative that you see, or when you go on social media. Your perspective of these narratives causes you to be afraid. And I'm like, how many other people are like you? This is a guy from small town Texas, served in the Navy, the whole nine, and he said, most of the people that he knows feel the same way. Like they're afraid.
What specifically are they afraid of? The idea of defunding police?
Well,
speaking of, sorry to interrupt. Speaking of afraid, we can't see your face. Ish.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing comic stuff.
Oh, okay.
I got my hands full with comic books so my phone is sitting down.
I got you.
And my hands are full with comics. No, I mean, like, it's not just the defund idea. Like, he mentioned what's going on in Chaz in Washington, and he's mentioning that the people, from his perspective, and he's not talking about protesters, he's talking about rioters and looters and such, but it's not just the rioting and the looting, it's that it's allowed to happen. And these are people, I'm not justifying them being afraid or what have you, but I told him, I said, dude, like, this is all going to come to an end. And he's like, man, I think you're just more optimistic than I am. He's like, and I'm like, well, why does it concern you so much? And I remember he just got like passionate and emotional, and he said, Ish, he was like, this is our country. He's like, I have a stake in it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm watching, what appears to be unrest all over the place. And, he's not saying it's not justified or anything. He's just afraid. He's like, businesses get torn apart, and it's like, on the one hand, it's like we're not supposed to say anything about it because we're wrong. And he goes, and on the other hand, someone gets killed defending his friend's business, and he's like, and what am I supposed to think? How am I supposed to feel? And I just had to understand that he genuinely felt a certain way, and that there are probably a lot of people who feel that way.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And now that you're saying it, I'm starting to actually reevaluate what I said before about thinking that Biden was going to be the favorite, because I've always had it in my head that this is going to be a weakness of his, is his inability to really sincerely appeal to people. But I think that when that fear is out there, the thing is, that's a type of fear, there is a fear that exists, and like an almost equal opposite fear for different reasons that exists among liberals,
right.
Exists, among the further left for slightly different reasons, the people I identify with. And we're all afraid right now, but Trump is the only one that is channeling one particular strand of that fear. And the people who are afraid, beyond those who beyond the mainstream liberals who are so afraid that they want Trump out of office, but they would be like, no matter what the circumstances were, voting for whichever Democrat the nominee was. Beyond that group, they don't represent a broad enough slice of the population for Biden to win with alone. And that's definitely very very concerning.
I was having a conversation, same person, and I've invited him on the show. He was supposed to come on, a long time ago. But same person, we were having a conversation, and he was, we were just talking about the potential of like the military going in, right? And how Donald Trump, and that was a concern of his, how Donald Trump is encouraging, mayors and governors to send in, the military. And it occurred to me, and I told him as much. I said, here's what's telling to me. Like, there's this gray area, and I don't think a lot of people recognize it because they pick one side or the other. Like, you got a lot of liberals who are, applauding these governors and mayors for not sending in troops, and you got a lot of conservatives who are siding with Donald Trump and saying that these governors and these mayors are kind of ridiculous for not sending in troops. And what I see is this gray area where, and I said to him, I said, listen, because I said, say you consider sending in troops to take up arms against these people as the right thing to do, right? And you're the mayor, and I'm advising you. My advice to you would be, don't do it. Let Donald Trump give that order. And Donald Trump's advisors are going to be telling him, don't do it. Let these mayors give that order, because someone at the end of the day has to take the fall for such an act. Like, when it's all said and done, if the National Guard come in and start shooting people, at the end of the day, when everything is cleaned up and all the smoke clears, someone is still going to pay for allowing that to happen. And I don't think any of these governors. So for me, it's like, I see this gray area where there's like a standoff, where these governors and these mayors are like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're going to make him do it. And he's like, well, yeah, we're not doing that. I'm not doing it. I'm going to make them do it. And I'm going to speak. I'm going to criticize them publicly. I'm going to criticize them in the media. But this is ultimately, what I see happening, I don't know, you guys still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm still there.
So ultimately what I see happening, because I kind of look at the worst, right? I prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah.
I think that if this doesn't begin to subside based upon actual change, I think that something bad is going to happen. And the reason why I say that is because historically, it's been my observation, just from my understanding of history, that like change just doesn't come cheap.
Hey, so a couple things quickly. We only have 2 minutes left. Okay. I want to get a chance. I don't know if Emily has a chance to chime in before we leave. I want to give her a chance. I don't know if that's
Emily's here as well.
What are you chiming in about?
Hey, Emily.
Well, yeah, if that's going to make sense. So basically, my thing is, if we're playing chicken, I am afraid to play chicken with Donald Trump because I think he is the person who is brash enough to pull the trigger on things that should not be pulled. But Emily, we're basically talking about, Donald Trump sending troops in versus governors or mayors.
Yeah, I kind of took it into a different direction than what was really, I kind of segued. But anyway, sorry.
No, but he's totally like, it's totally like a whole game of like, well, you're idiots for not doing your job and blah, 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 law and order, safety, blah, blah, blah. But then on the flip side, the governors are like, well, we don't want to be the ones to like fuck everything up.
Yeah, who wants to make that call?
Well, I was reading somewhere, and I'm not surprised at all, but the curfew in New York City was made by the mayor of New York specifically, like de Blasio specifically said, like on TV, that he doesn't want Donald Trump coming in with the National Guard because, like, once you open that barn door, like, it's open, like, you can't get him back out practically.
I mean, there are state rights and the such, but the reality is, and this is the one thing that people overlook, like, I'm prior military, so I understand. Like, Donald Trump does not need the mayors or the governors to give that order. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He's the highest in the chain of command. So he really doesn't need them.
Hey, try the 8 o'clock one when you come back in, and if it doesn't...
No, I'm not talking about the curfew.
No. I'm saying we're going to end